Welcome to Real Life Survivor Stories, a talk show about real life, real people, and real stories. If you're just tuning in today, Real Life Survivor is a nonprofit organization. And what makes us unique? It's an organization for every cause, every circumstance, and every condition. So no one is left out or ever has to feel alone. We cover stories on every platform. And today we have with us Courtney Eustace. And Courtney is a real life survivor of narcissistic abuse. Welcome, Courtney. Welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you here.
Hi, Julie. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you are a real life survivor of narcissistic abuse. Yes. And there's so many people watching today that have gone through the same thing or are going through the same thing, and they don't know where to turn. So your story today is going to help someone out there watching. So could you take us through maybe where it all began and where it started to feel wrong, and when you knew there was some red flags there?
Yep. Well, the red flags, it really took a few years for those red flags really to come through for me.
Right.
I really didn't see them for the longest time. Even if my friends or family kind of said something and they were worried about something, I had that biased feeling that you don't know him like I know him.
Right.
And so it took about maybe like 3 years into our 5-year relationship for me to really see what was really going on. And for me, the biggest part was when we were living in Ontario. We were away from friends and family.
Yes.
And I was working 3 jobs while he worked the one to pay for our rent.
Wow.
I wasn't really allowed to see any of my friends. He didn't want me to really socialize, more than thinking if I might find somebody better. So he got jealous if I'd had guy friends. I wasn't allowed to have those. But even just my girlfriends, he didn't want any kind of outside type of influence on me.
Right.
And on our relationship. So I was pretty alone in Ontario, especially where my friends and family were back here. But I loved him a lot, and I really thought we had a future, and we were planning our wedding and everything like that. But the finances, that started to take a toll on me. I had maxed out credit cards. He promised he'd pay me back. He would take out cash loans, and then he'd have to pay those. And when he didn't have the finances to pay those every month, I had to pay that for him.
Yes.
So I was kind of stretched thin, and it got to a point where I knew there was an ultimatum for him, and that was moving back to New Brunswick. He wanted to stay in Ontario. He wanted to get married, raise our family there, and just kind of stay there by ourselves. And I didn't want that for my future children. I grew up around my grandparents.
Right.
So that's what I wanted for them too. And so one day at work, I just kind of had enough. And I texted him and I said, I'm feeling really homesick. I really miss my friends, my family, and I really think that we should move back home. It's time.
Right.
And I knew in the back of my mind that that was going to be kind of the message to, one, start a huge fight that would ultimately get him to break up with me.
Right.
So then I could move home. And because that was the thing, I knew I wasn't going to be able to break up with him.
You always knew the outcome, basically, is what you're trying to say.
Well, not so much that I knew the outcome. It was just that I knew I didn't have the guts to do it. In my head and my heart were completely separate. In my heart, I wanted to be with him. But in my brain, it was like, no, Courtney, this is wrong. This is bad. You feel like this all of the time. There's something going on. But that gut feeling, I just shoved and shoved away because he promised me, you know, things will change, things will change. And the more times that they didn't change, it was almost like I expected, you know, the changed behavior, and then I was let down. But I shouldn't have had those expectations to begin with because he was never going to change. And so it was really accumulation of events through the years for me to really step back and be like, whoa, what is going on? This isn't right. This isn't the relationship I want to be in. And this isn't the relationship that I was promised or, you know, that I deserve. And so it really took me a long time to really get to that point of, you know, walking away and really seeing the red flags.
With that said, and I hear you on all that because I can relate to you on that level. The hardest part, I think, is when your family sees what you're going through, your mom, your dad, your siblings, and they try to talk to you, they see things aren't right, but you know, in our minds, we're not going to listen to that. We want to still, you know, go forward with it. And because, like you say, you loved him, and that kept you there, and in hopes that, you know, maybe it was just maybe having a bad day. Maybe he'll change tomorrow, and tomorrow will be a better day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he kept promising that, and that's what I really thought. And, you know, my mom, you know, she's always been that, you know, overprotective mom. So
yes.
for the longest time, I always just thought that was just her, you know, being a mother bear. And same with my friends, you know, your best friends, you know, typically tell you if they think that, you know,
right.
the
exactly.
person you're with is good enough for you. But at the same time, you always say, like, oh, go away. They're good. Like, I love them. They're going to be great for me. And you kind of just, like, push away their judgment because, you know, you see a different side. And that was the biggest thing, is that he was very good at being two people. And he was one person with me and another person completely with everybody else. So when it came to his side of the family and his friends, or even new people he didn't know, he projected this, you know, self-entitled, successful, very well-groomed, charming appearance.
Right.
And then with me, he was, you know, super lovey, but then also controlling at the same time. And, you know, my close friends and family, they called out, you know, firsthand on that BS. They knew it wasn't
yes.
real and stuff. But my parents, they also stood back a bit because they saw that I was happy and that, you know, I told them how much I loved him. And I made excuses and excuses to hide things just because, you know, I loved him and I wanted them to love him. And I wanted my friends to love him. And it always never sat good with me that knowing deep in the back of my mind that I was going to get married and none of my friends or family were going to be happy with it. And they were forever going to have this weird feeling. But yet, you know, all of his friends and family are all, this is amazing, you guys are so amazing and perfect together,
right.
and all this stuff, but it's all on the outside. And so for me, that was the hardest part, was distinguishing the two people and really noticing that there was two different people. Because for me, it was really kind of just one person, and I could really see both sides, but he was very good at being the two.
Did you ever feel controlled to the point where you felt like a prisoner in your own home, like where he was controlling your every move, how much you did and how much he didn't want you to do, kind of thing? Did you ever feel like you know, at times were being like suffocated with the rules of, you know, the narcissist, I guess?
Every once in a while. He wasn't, you know, overbearing, controlling. Like, I was allowed to leave the house and
right.
stuff like that. And there was never any type of physical abuse or anything like that either. It was just more, you know, the constant texting and calling. Where are you? When are you coming home? Like, you know, it's 5 minutes after 5 and I'm not home yet. Where are you? What are you doing? All day at work, constantly.
Wow.
Or if I'm out with friends, a girls' night. What are you doing? Where are you? Who are you talking to? How come you're not home yet? It's been an hour since you talked to me. You're not answering. So many occasions I'd go out with my girlfriends or just with work friends, and it would end up at the end of the night, him and I having a big fight, or while we're out, I've had countless fights where I'm outside by myself, you know, we're yelling on the phone and my friends are inside having a great time. Or at the end of the night, you know, I'm upset, my night's ruined, my friends' nights are ruined, and I don't know how many times. I've maybe had, you know, a handful of times where it was a good time because nothing ever happened. And that's the thing, nothing ever did happen, but he just didn't trust me. But I also never gave him a reason to not trust me. It was
right.
just, you know, that type of control for him.
Exactly. Now, when you were out with your friends, as soon as you got that phone call or that text, they knew right away, you know, after the multiple times that this happened, here we go again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And with that said, did he ever try to, like, groom your parents? Like, they try, meaning, like, he lets them think he's this great person, you know, this perfect guy for you, and how much he loves you, and so on and so forth. But behind closed doors, you know the other side of him that people don't see. And then again, you don't want to betray, like, him and his trust, or kind of give the secret away that, you know, he really isn't a good person.
Yeah. Oh, I fought to keep that secret for the whole 5 years because
it's hard.
And it's funny because, you know, I was warned when we first started dating by a few people, and especially by his ex-girlfriends. They reached out to me and told me how he cheated on them and he's going to do it to you and, you know, that kind of stuff. And, you know, I took that information and I was like, you know what, thank you, and I'm going to see what happens on my own.
Right.
And I mean, yes, should I have listened to that? Probably. And, you know, at the end of relationships, everybody always says that.
Do we ever listen? No,
Damn, why didn't I listen to her when she messaged me 5 years ago?
Exactly.
But, I mean, you know, we all got to try it out for ourselves and make our own mistakes. And
that's how we learn, right?
Yeah. And, I mean, I learned good. But, yeah, I kept that secret for a long time, just trying to make excuses, you know, on things where he wouldn't come to family events. I'd make excuses, and he was just at home. or if he decided to go to a friend's house instead, or if the reason why I was upset, and especially when I lived in Ontario, it was really easy to hide me being upset because unless I called my mom or a friend and told them I was upset, nobody would know. Okay. And so I was able to hide a lot of the things that happened between us because, one, I was far away, and it was just kind of easy because I wanted them to love him as much as I did. So if we'd come home for dinners with my parents, he'd be sitting there watching hockey with my dad, and because he's just a big enough hockey fan as my dad. So they would bond together, drink beers, and we could go out and have a good time because he knew how to put on that charm, and he could please anybody he wanted to. Anybody he just first met, somebody off the street, He gives off that personality where he'd give his shirt off his back to help somebody, or to be really kind to people. But that's the main, that's the fake persona, that because
they
want people, they want people to like them,
and
all this stuff. But I mean, my mom, though,
it's exhausting.
She knew it was fake.
Right. So here's a question for you. As I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm thinking to myself, did he ever get you upset enough where you called your parents crying, okay, and they come to your rescue basically? How does he react? Is he, passive aggressive with this, or is it all your fault? How does he act when something like that happens? Have you ever had that, that experience?
That really only happened the one time.
Right.
There was a few times where my parents came out to visit and stuff like that. Like our first Christmas in Ontario, my parents and my brother, they flew out to spend Christmas with us.
Right.
And we had a really tiny one-bedroom apartment, and we cooked a full turkey dinner and had presents and stuff, and invited my neighbor, and we had a great time. And I thought he had a good time at the time. I don't know if he did or not, but thought he did. But my parents I never really called them to rescue me or anything like that. But I mean, obviously, if I had a hard day, especially when I was living in Ontario, I got close to my mom on the phone. I'd call her maybe 4 times a day. But she also worked in the same industry as me too. So if I had a question about something at work, then she could help me. But then too, just on my drive home from work, traffic, I'd be sitting 45 minutes, an hour in traffic on the QEW to go home, and music gets boring, so I called my mom or my grandfather, how's your day going, and stuff like that. And then so some days it was really easy to tell them that I was upset or what things would go on, but at the same time I would choose what I would tell them because I didn't want that to affect his image and them to not like him. And because they knew that I wanted to marry him and that their blessing was important to me. But the only time I really had to kind of be saved and was left on my own was when we ultimately did break up. My mom had scheduled, it was around my birthday, and my mom had scheduled to come visit me and surprise me. Her and my dad, they were going to fly out to Ontario, come stay for the weekend, go shopping, and have dinner and hang out. And I didn't know this was happening, and then 2 days before it happened, I sent that text message, like I said before, that I was homesick. And we had this big fight at work, so on my way home I called my mom. I was really upset, and that's when she tells me, well, this is kind of a bad time to tell you, but we're coming to visit you next week for your birthday.
Wow.
And I'm like, great, here we go. How am I going to do this with my parents? And so then I really wanted, and at the same time though, him and I were going back and forth on if we were going to stay together or not. So at the beginning of December is when we had this fight, and when I said I was homesick and I wanted to go home. But I didn't actually leave until the end of December. So we were still living together while we were still kind of, he was sleeping on the couch and he was still kind of undecided, doing that whole pullback and emotional love bombing, and just, I still love you, I still want to be with you, and I can still change. But me trying to be set in my mind that no, you're not going to change, that I'm keeping this decision, we're breaking up, we're ending the wedding, that's it.
Right.
And so then I really wanted him just to pretend like everything was fine, come to dinner with me, celebrate my birthday.
Yes.
And then once my parents were gone, then we'll tell them, and that's it. But no, he couldn't just pretend, so I had to go out to dinner with my parents by myself. And I showed up to the restaurant, and they were there, and I just started crying as soon as I saw them, because I'm like, now I have to move home, and now I'm 25 at this point, and I have to move home, back with my parents, start over, what am I going to do? And it was really upsetting and hard for me, especially to do that alone. And I even, even said to him, why can't we go do this together as a couple and tell my parents? They have helped us with the wedding, making deposits, and my mom actually flew back to Ontario a few times to help me look for wedding dresses. And so, we were actively planning all these things. And so I'm like, can we just save face just for one night? but he couldn't give me that one night. So here I was, had to tell my parents by myself, make plans to move home, stayed in the hotel with them that whole weekend by myself. And it was just like the worst birthday, most depressing thing I had to kind of go through. And I really wanted him there to, you know, go through that with me. But that just really showed me that he didn't care about me because, you know, he couldn't be a man and stand up, you know, to my parents and say that, like, you know, this is what's happening.
But it seems to fall back on the victim.
Yeah, so
even
when,
everything right. So when you're going through it yourself, it's exhausting and it's just draining, and they know what they're doing. Yeah. And like I say, there's many people here watching today that are going through this right, you know, this very second, or have gone through it. Now, with that said, what has it done to your person? Like, have you had to get counseling or therapy for this?
Yeah. It's done a lot to myself, my personality, my overall attitude, and outlook on life, and honestly outlook on future relationships and, you know, marriage and kids and all those things, because those were things we had planned together.
Yes.
And, you know, making those plans and making that commitment, you know, I'm the type of person where I thought, you know, marriage is for life for me, right? And I thought that was my person. And so to have all that kind of crash down and, you know, think, well, great, where am I going to go now? I thought I had a future. I thought I had a path, kind of a 5-year plan, right? And that all came crashing down. So then now you're kind of self-loathing in yourself and, you know, am I enough? Am I good enough?
Or low self-esteem.
Yeah, and like if, you know,
takes a shot,
what am I going to now? And especially when you're in a long relationship too. You're in a long time, so now to start over again and, you know, and I know it's, you know, I'm still young and it's easy to find new relationships and stuff like that, but then when you spend a chunk of time with one person and then to think like all of it, and just like that, it's just over, and that kind of chunk of time, and really you just sit there wondering, like, you know, like what the hell happened? And like you kind of don't understand yourself and like your emotions and stuff, and I just felt really alone. For about 2 years, I went through just kind of like this self-loathing phase where I lived with my parents.
Yes.
And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no interest in a future, no motivation. At the same time, that's when COVID started, right at the beginning. So that didn't help the depression. And living with my parents kind of outside of town, that didn't really help either. Being 28 years old now at that point, having to live with my parents and figure out what I'm going to do. And then COVID, you're stuck in your house, you can't leave.
Right, exactly.
And then, you know, you're trying to get your mind off of things and, you know, trying to meet new people. We couldn't do that during COVID. So,
no.
I mean, COVID kind of put an extra stab into the healing process that was unexpected.
Yes.
But, so then it took me about 2 years where I was in that kind of really low depressive state where finally I went to counseling to speak to somebody. And that really helped a lot, just, you know, talking with somebody. And she gave me a lot of tips on, I was suffering from panic attacks and anxiety. And during my relationship, I was sleepwalking almost every night.
Wow.
And I couldn't stay asleep and I would just sleepwalk. But I was just so riddled with anxiety through our entire relationship. And then even afterwards too, just, am I going to see him in person? Or, you know, am I going to see his friends? Or what's going to happen? So I never wanted to leave the house. And so kind of just everyday life just made it really hard because, you know, what happens if I see him? It's kind of one of like the bigger things. But all of that was kind of hard. But then once I did go to counseling and I got some help from her, and she gave me tips on, you know, how to handle my anxiety, get out of situations. And that really helped, honestly, just to talk about it. Because at the same time, I've never experienced this myself. This was the first time I experienced this. And I don't know anybody else who had been through it too. So all I had was just reading information online, finding some random people on Instagram, other women who've gone through it, and just following their pages and their social media and sharing what they're sharing. And that kind of helped me, you know, really move forward a little bit.
Yes.
By seeing those people go through it, because I kind of felt crazy, and I'm like, this isn't real, or he wasn't that bad, or all this kind of stuff, or it's all in my head, I'm making this up. But until I found these other women on social media and hearing their stories, it really came to light, like, hey, Courtney, you're not crazy. This is a real thing, you know, narcissists are real. And,
very
you
real.
know, and it really, once I was able to confirm that, like with myself, and, you know, and kind of swallow that, it really helped me to kind of move forward. And honestly, like those just random people I don't even know online helped me.
And in the, you're saying that women, you've heard their stories, but also there's men watching as well.
Oh, absolutely.
That,
Absolutely.
they've been in abusive relationships with narcissist women and men. And it's an awful, awful thing. It consumes your whole life and your whole person.
Yep.
And
it even affects how you make new relationships with people too. And, I find I'm more guarded. And I was a very open, extroverted, happy-kind-of-go-lucky person. And that kind of destroyed that. And I put up walls and didn't really, kind of approach people as much. Or, I didn't want to be, that face in the room anymore and kind of be noticed. And I just didn't want light to shine on me at all. But that was kind of how he made me feel, kind of towards the end of the relationship. I went from being at the beginning, the very honeymoon phase, and I love you, to being shrinking down to, this big.
yes.
And he had a way of making me feel like that, so then afterwards, I still feel like that, because for the whole 5 years, just took me all the way down to year 5. And so then,
That's the control they have, right? That's the power.
Yeah.
And of course, you get your power back after you leave the narcissist, but really, mentally and emotionally, you're still in the narcissist relationship.
Yeah.
And you're more guarded with people, like as you say.
When it came to sharing my story, I was honestly afraid of it wasn't I was afraid to share my feelings and what happened to me with people. It was more the embarrassment that I kind of let it happen.
Right.
And that I didn't see those red flags, or I didn't see the signs, and I didn't follow my gut. And honestly, in the back of my mind, the voices were, kind of all these other women, who knew him or who he had cheated me on with, were like, haha, she's stupid. And, kind of just that, those things were in the back of my mind.
Because they've been there, and
yeah, especially with him personally, or they knew his character and they knew his history and his past. And so I kind of just felt like I kind of had a target on my back. And it was like people told me, you shouldn't have done this, you did it. So I just kind of felt more embarrassed that I didn't feel like I was, kind of smart enough that I didn't see these signs. But retyping it and, reworking it to, get it on the poster and to advertise it, it was really hard the first time. It was 3 pages.
Yes, I remember.
And I think I cried almost the whole time when I was writing it.
Yes.
The second time it was a little easier, but by the third time, just whizzing out those words, and it gave me the confidence to just keep typing and just to get it perfect on paper.
And exactly, and you get to see your story instead of reliving it over and over every day and worrying about what people are going to think and all that stuff. You actually get to read what you're going through, and it's visual, and you're seeing it, other people are seeing it, and that's what the posters are for. They're to highlight your story. And if someone has to come across that and say, oh my God, I'm going through the same thing, I'm not alone. That's what that's for. And the stories that go on the website, again, those stories will be there after we're all gone, and your story lives on. So that's your thumbprint, basically. So it gives you validation. But when you share your story, I know, as you say, you're worried about how people are going to perceive you and if they're going to judge you. But in all reality, they're inspired by you. And they don't feel alone. They know that there's someone else out there going through the same thing, and now they just feel, like I say, not so alone.
Yeah, just a little bit better.
Your story helps so many, and the people watching today, women and men alike, are going through this terrible thing with a narcissistic abuse, which is a lifelong sentence, basically. And it scars you, and you have to just work on yourself gradually. And you're not going to always be healed 100%, but there's going to be parts of you that starts to heal little by little.
Well, and I have good days and I have bad days.
Absolutely.
It's been about 4 years now since we've been broken up.
Right.
I'm in a new healthy relationship, and we trust each other completely.
That's beautiful.
He's my best friend, and he gives me the most confidence in the world. And I've never felt more confident in myself and in my own personality and in my body. But that's because I have a partner who fully trusts me, and I fully trust him, and we have communication. And You know, just telling somebody that they're beautiful and that you love them, it goes a long way.
Right.
And, you know, and it's also the actions that go with the words. Narcissists are very quick with the words, and they know the words, and they're very charming with their words, but it's the actions that don't follow. And that's the main difference, is that, you know, you need those actions to follow and to really make you feel good.
But with a narcissist, you're not going to get that.
No.
And with what you have now, you've come a long way, and it's hard to find someone as good as you have. So for people that are watching, there is life after narcissist abuse. Hang in there. Courtney's living proof. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, Courtney. You are a bright light, and you have touched so many without even knowing it. And again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. And if you're someone that would like to share their real life survivor story, you can reach out to me on Facebook under Julie Comeau, and I have a fan page, Real Life Survivor. Also our website at reallifesurvivor.com. And remember, no matter the struggle, no matter the challenge, no matter the obstacle, never give up. We'll see you back here next time with another real life survivor story.